Cherokee, one of the most played jazz standards today. It was written by a British composer, Ray Noble, in 1938 in dedication to the Native American tribe known as the Cherokee Indians. The tune itself, Cherokee, is chock full of 2-5-1s, which makes it a great tune to shred on and also a great training ground to practice all of your vocabulary. It's said that even Charlie Parker regularly practiced this tune in all 12 keys. So, in this video, we're going to break down this tune Cherokee measure by measure and discuss ways all the way through as to how to solo on this tune. As a reference, we'll use a Cherokee etude from our resource 25 Melodic Etudes over Jazz Standards, a book that I wrote when I first joined this jazz lesson videos team. In it, you'll find a variety of 25 different etudes that I poured my heart into writing with the intention of having as much melodic variety as possible. In it, you'll also find backing tracks for all the etudes as well as recordings of me playing each one of them. If you're interested in this 25 Melodic Etudes over Jazz Standards, you can find the link to download it in the description below and use code MELODIC5 for $5 off. Alright, so let's get into it and discuss how to approach Cherokee measure by measure. First thing worth noting is this is one of the longer tunes in jazz with a 64 bar form in AABA. So this is page 23 of the Melodic Etudes over Jazz Standards. And in the first measure, I open up with this. So what's that? So over our one chord, the concert B flat 6, we're going to take the sound of that chord scale, in this case B flat major, and we're going to do this cool little enclosure pattern I came across a long time ago. You're essentially taking every single note of the scale and then you can play a 2-note enclosure around each of the notes. This particular enclosure is one scale tone above and one chromatic pitch from below. And that ends up sounding like this. It's a really, really great pattern. This works over all kinds of contexts. But also for this chord, other things you could do is literally just play the chord tones. You get bonus points if you add the ninth in there. Alright, just some random notes in random order, but using the sound of the 1/6 plus a ninth. That sounds pretty cool. That's also just a B flat pentatonic scale, so if you'd rather think of it like that, be my guest. My theory teacher in college said, jazz is like a kaleidoscope. There's many ways to look at the same thing. Okay, moving on, we have a 2-5-2-4, right? Right, so all your 2-5 language that you might have, which Jazz Lesson Videos has a lot of resources on this already, but also just stuff that you found in transcriptions work as well. That's one of my favorites. I like this one too. Awesome. The one I have written here is pretty cool. So what's going on there? So in our minor 7 chord, we start off with an approach to the flat third. In this case, you can think of it as a chromatic approach or a diatonic approach. They're both exactly the same here. Then we descend chord tones. Right here, we play a 4-note enclosure around the 5th of our next chord. That's the target. Now we're going to play a 3-note enclosure targeting the 3rd of this chord. Now from here, we're going to play an upper structure from the 3rd. So from the 3rd of a dominant chord, you can find a half diminished 7 chord. Another way you can think of this is a rootless B flat 9 chord, right? Again, jazz theory is like a kaleidoscope. Anyway, we voice lead down to the 5th of our 4 chord here. And really in this line here, I'm implying the sound of a 4-6 chord, concert E flat major 6. Fun fact, this chord is also just an inversion of a C minor 7 chord. They're the exact same chord, just from a different permutation. So I play with the shape a bit here. That's a line that you'll hear a lot. all that was completely just using the notes of that E flat 6 chord. Now for this next chord, I'm going to retain the shape, but take that G and lower it down a half step to fit this chord. Now from here, I want to keep this melodic direction going. We got something cool here. So I made the notes keep stair-stepping up. All this is completely diatonic to the sound of E flat melodic minor. Anytime you have a dominant chord like we have here, that's not functioning as a 5 chord going to 1, usually the most reliable bet is to turn it into a Lydian dominant. And so if we have A flat Lydian dominant, that is a child of a parent scale. What is the parent scale? E flat melodic minor. And just as a quick reminder, there's only 4 parent scales in jazz. And by a parent scale, I mean an asymmetrical 7-note scale. And those 4 are major, melodic minor, and harmonic major, the most uncommon one. If you know the modes to at least the first 3, then you are good to go for 99.9% of jazz standards. Anyway, let's check out what I wrote next. I don't even remember. So what I'm doing there, when we arrive back to the 1 chord, we're going to each chord tone. We're going to play the chord tone and then skip down a scale tone. And then you're just going to walk up the scale back to that chord tone. All right, we just did it for the 7. Now we got to do it for the 5th. Skip down, walk back up. Do it for the 3rd. Skip down. And I just land back on the root. And so we can do this with any chord, and it looks like that's exactly what I do on the next chord. Now from here, we are going to arpeggiate up in diatonic thirds. And that ends up being a G minor upper structure, which is the structure found from the 5th of a dominant 7 chord. And I return back to the 3rd. And from here, I'm going to arpeggiate up diatonic thirds again, giving us another upper structure. We're back to that sound of the rootless dominant 9 chord, in this case a rootless C9 chord, or you can think of the half diminished upper structure from the 3rd. So we got a good old E half diminish here. So let's hear all this together so far. So fun to play. It's all coming back to me. I remember when I wrote this, I had a blast writing this. All right, so now from here, starting from the root of our 2 chord, we're gonna walk down the bebop scale. In this case, adding a passing tone between the root and the flat 7. But then from here, we're just gonna walk down the chord tones. Now we're going to play a 2-note approach to the flat 9 of our 6 dominant flat 9 chord. Now there's this pretty cool chromatic line that I found here. If you take a look at it, we're really just outlining each of the chord tones, starting from the flat 9. Right on every single downbeat. But we decorate it by adding some nice passing tones. So that last jump there, we played the flat 7, which ends up being an approach note, perfectly voice leading from the flat 7 to the 3rd. This is a successful guide tone relationship here. Anytime you can connect the 3rd to the 7, or vice versa, this is the quintessential sound of playing the changes. Now, I'm going to walk down a scale tone, and then return back up to the 3rd here. And I'm going to ascend that upper structure. In this case, when we have the upper structure from the minor 3rd of a minor chord, if you want all the notes to be completely diatonic, this will end up giving you a major 7. So as you can see here, we're playing an E flat major 7 here, which is also a rootless C minor 9 sound. Now we're going to have some good old Charlie Parker style chromaticism. I've heard this called a chromatic crawl. Maybe that's a bit dramatic, but let's go with it. This is a chromatic crawl to the fourth of this 5 augmented 7 chord. Right, so fourth is not the most desirable note, so we quickly get off of it. And we end up approaching the sharp 5 of this augmented chord. The quintessential sound of an augmented chord is that sharp 5. Here's a normal dominant 7. Now here's a augmented dominant 7. Now, bonus points, like I've done here, if you get rid of the 7, just the augmented triad by itself is, in my opinion, even more powerful. A lot of people back in the day were really rocking just the good old augmented triad. Charlie Parker was doing it within his Cherokee solos. Lester Young was doing it all over his solos. This augmented triad by itself, without the 7, is really powerful. So starting at measure 13, all this sounds like. What a cool resolution. And now we're just going to play the melody a bit. And that marks my deviation away from the melody, and I begin another sweet 2/5 line that I have pretty ingrained in my system. It makes me feel sort of bluesy. It triggers something in my biracial DNA. Let's play it again. Right, we got that blue note, that flat third within that chord. Totally free reign in jazz. We welcome that sound. That is a blue note. The rest of the notes in that measure are purely the B flat major pentatonic sound. Ooh. All right, so now this next line is one of my favorites of this whole etude. This is an example of a line that hasn't really came out in my own improvisation yet. I sort of discovered this as I was writing it out. And what it was inspired from was some solo that I can't remember off the top of my head from Phil Woods. So this is a Phil Woods inspired line. Let's hear it real quick. Right, just a really cool way to elongate a slow fall, but also hitting all the changes in time. From the 5th of that 4 chord, I'm playing the good old digital 1, 2, 3, 5 cell, etc. And now I'm going to fall to the 7th. And from here, I'm really playing this sound. It's the sound of diatonic thirds falling. But sticking to this rhythm, I'm going to add passing tones in their appropriate areas. I really wish I could remember the Phil Woods solo that I was inspired for that part. If you know it, please write it in the comments. Okay, moving on, this pickup here. That is the 3 chord of the melodic minor that we're in. Remember we said this was E flat melodic minor? So if you take the diatonic 7s, that chord right there, that's what I'm playing. This is a really nice upper structure to borrow when you're in a Lydian dominant chord. It just sounds great. That's the G flat augmented major 7. So we start on this 7th of this upper structure, that chord I just said, and we're just going to arpeggiate up. Now on that final note, we're back into the 1 chord. So what's going on there? We play a scale run down from the 5 all the way down to the root. And now we start this little fun pattern where we play each note of this 1 chord's triad, and then right after it, we're going to play 1 chromatic pitch below, and then return back up to that target note. So it sounds like this. Right, so you got this 3-note pattern happening in 8th notes, so you get this sort of syncopation going on. And from here, I play the F1, 2, 3, 5 sound. When you play this, what I call melodic upper structure, it ends up giving you this major 7 chords, 5, 6, 7, 9, all very desirable notes for a major 7 chord. Now on our 2 dominant 7 chord, we got this. That was inspired by Cannonball Adderley's line on Milestones. Right, we got that same shape from the top. And just slightly embellish it by continuing that melodic shape down the scale. And then I play this melodic figure. 1, 2, 3, 5 from the root of this chord, very effective. And I'm going to walk back down to the 3rd and then walk up in diatonic 3rds again. So all together. Now, moving on, I'm going to play the 7th of this 2 chord and go down the chord tones. And then I'm going to do it again, but replace 7 with 6 this time, and then go down the chord tones again. Now I'm going to go back up, and we're going to continue this chromatic movement down that we got going on from this top voice, and now switch to a modified version of the Crimea River lick. Really, really cool. If you don't know what the Crimea River lick is, I talk about it in the video that we did recently in this channel entitled Jazz Vocabulary That Every Musician Should Know. So check that out if you want a deep dive into the Crimea River sound. Anyway, we end off the line. It's that rootless 1 major 9 sound, or you can take an upper structure from the 3rd, giving you a concert D minor 7 sound. And we'll resolve on the root. Now we're going to anticipate the next chord by already playing the notes in those changes. This is a technique that Cannonball Adderley did a lot. All that was a diatonic enclosure targeting the flat 3 of this 2-5 up a half step from the root of our tune here. So now we're in the key of B major, and this bridge is just 2-5-1 city. So we bust out all of our 2-5-1 concepts that we're all hopefully working on every day. Let's hear and break down the first one. Ooh. So again, we target that flat 3rd with a 4-note diatonic enclosure, and from this 3rd, we're going to play the sound of 1, 2, 3, 5. Now those last 2 notes, those are diatonic 3rds, so we're going to play 1 more diatonic 3rd. And that ends up bringing us to the 9th of this chord. And to use this dramatic word again, we're going to play that chromatic crawl downwards. And it perfectly voice leads us onto the 3rd of our dominant 7 chord. This is another piece of language from the Essential Jazz Vocabulary Workbook, and I call it the Donnelly resolution, right? Because I just did it over this chord. So that's a really important piece of vocabulary to learn in all 12 keys. So with this line, I resolve it to the 3rd, and I play, which is, again, a 1, 2, 3, 5 sound, this time from the 5th of this chord. And then starting on the 7th of this chord, I'm going to arpeggiate up the chord tones. Now I make it to the 7th, and I'm going to do that chromatic crawl to be dramatic one more time to the 5th. Now I'm going to play a 3-note enclosure around that note. The target is the 7th of this minor 7 chord. Now let's play this 2-5 and break down what's happening. So what is going on here? So we target this flat 7th of this chord and go down the chord tones. Then we're going to go back up through the chord tones and add 1 more diatonic 3rd. So it ends up being this chord's 9th or the next chord's 6th. And now we're going to decorate this sort of classic voice leading movement in jazz. This is the 6th, the flat 13th through the 9th. So that's what this line is based off of. That final phrase here is a diatonic enclosure encircling that root twice. Then we're going to dip down to the fifth and in a rhythmic way chromatically approach the sixth. So all together. Now we're going to keep this melodic motif we just established going through this next 2/5. Let's hear it. So what's going on here? We start on the flat seventh of this minor chord and chromatically approach the root. And now we finally deviate away from this motif and develop it with this new melody here. It's that sound again, it's that upper structure, this time found on a different chord. In this case, we're implying that this D7 chord is altered. And who is the dad or the mother of the D altered scale? Who's the parent? It's the E flat melodic minor again. So remember, whenever we have a parent scale of a melodic minor, you can go to the third diatonic chord of that scale and you will find a beautiful augmented major 7 sound. And it absolutely works over altered. So that entire chord, the notes are completely diatonic to E flat melodic minor. And then just in time, we resolve onto the major third of this one chord here. So now we're going to go up the triad and then go down to the root embellishment. Now we're going to chromatically approach the fifth. And now we're going to approach from above the sixth and end off on the fifth. It just sounds pretty cool. Now starting on the same note, we're going to begin this next 2/5 like this. So what's going on there? Again, 1, 2, 3, 5 sound from the fifth, but this time it's in minor to ensure that we get this flat 7 of this chord rather than. And then we'll play up one more diatonic third and descend back down. Now we're going to chromatically approach from below the third of this 5 chord here. Now this particular 4-note cell, I don't remember where I got it from, but I swear it was from some Baptiste Herbin solo that I studied. So you're going to play the third, jump up to the flat 13, and then play a chromatic enclosure around the root. It's a 2-note chromatic enclosure. This time, both notes are completely chromatic. Ends up giving you your flat 9, and then your major 7, and then the root. And then I just try to continue this shape, this sort of quirky set of intervals followed by a chromatic enclosure. And that's exactly what we do. Now this chord turns into a minor chord and this ends up being the 2 chord that will eventually get us to the 5 to the 1 back into the original key. So the last note we just played was a 6 of this 2 chord. So now we're going to find our way back to a chord tone. We play one of the very many variations of a 4-note enclosure, which targets that root. And now I try to take this melodic shape and carry it on as well. Now we land on the flat 7 of this F7 chord, and now I'm just going to go down and up diatonic thirds. And now this next cell, that's implying the sound of this chord being from the diminished scale. Right, so we just played F half whole diminished and took a nice shape found in that scale, which voice leads us to the root of our 1 chord. So let's hear this entire bridge before we finish off the rest of the solo. Awesome. So going on, we actually play a nice riff that I got from a rhythm change solo from Dan Higgins. Sounds like this. It's just a nice way to chromatically approach the third, and then chromatically walk up to the fifth, and then chromatically approach the third again. In keeping this chromatic energy, we're going to chromatically walk our way down to the fourth of this minor chord. I'm going to embellish this particular note by doing this. Some fun, simple melodic leaps there. Then from here, we're going to go down the sound of the B flat dominant bebop scale. And then we'll play the flat 9. So all together. Very satisfying to play chromatic run. Now we're going to play the short melody here. This is a slight embellishment of a pretty popular cell found in jazz. It sounds like this. I just add the ninth right before that last note. What it is, we first play the fifth and then skip all the way up to the third, and then we're going to descend the chord tone but skip the root. So 3, skip the root 7, and then 5. And then we return to the root, but in my case, we play the 9 and then the root. And from here, we play this sort of double approach enclosure, double targeting that root, and then go up the chord tones. And then land on the 6. And now we're back into the sound of that flat 7 dominant again. And remember what I said about this A flat dominant 7? Anytime you have a dominant chord functioning like this, chances are Lydian dominant is your safest bet. So we just play this sort of fun rhythmic motif using that sound. Now we play this nice, completely scalar diatonic figure that targets us back onto the third of our 1 chord. Now, this is a cool line that I discovered. I'm playing the sound of 3 and then a passing diminished chord to the 2. A passing diminish is a diminished chord with a root that's chromatically in between 2 chords. So I'm playing a D minor 7 to D flat fully diminished 7 to C minor 7 to F7 flat 9. And then I land onto the third of our 2 dominant 7 chord, and I go up that upper structure and play a classic bebop line. And now from this last note, I'm going to chromatically approach the 2 chords flat 7. And I'm going to walk down, just like from an earlier 2-5 from the bridge. In the same rhythm, I'm going to walk down the chord tones and then ascend back up them. And now we've got this really exotic sound here. What is that? Completely borrowing from the sound of F altered, we're going to find the third, right? So A, and we're going to play the sound of A major 7 flat 5. My teacher in grad school would call this the A Lydian grip because the flat 5 is also the sharp 11, which is the signature note of a Lydian scale, the Lydian sound, the sharp 11. And he calls it a grip because you could play all of those notes in one hand, in one grip on piano. So we play this A Lydian grip or A major 7 flat 5. We're going to start on the flat 7, which ends up being this chord's sharp 9. And then we just ascend up that arpeggio. And on that upper note here, this ends up being this chord's sharp 9. And we'll just walk down the sound of F altered, which is the child of the parent scale of sharp melodic minor. So really from this top note, we're going to walk down the F sharp melodic minor. And now we're 1/2 step away from voice leading to the third of our major 7 chord. And that's exactly what we do here. And we play that bluesy riff again. And now I'm going to play a chromatic approach back to the 5th. And altogether it sounds like this. So let's hear that pickup measure into the final A section of this etude. Awesome. Well, everybody, that concludes today's video. I hope that it helped, and I really hope you enjoyed it as well. Again, if you'd like to download the full book that this etude is from, along with 24 other etudes over jazz standards, which come with recordings and backing tracks of all the material, you can find the link to 25 melodic etudes over jazz standards in the description below. And don't forget to use code MELODIC5 for $5 off. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching this video, and as always, please consider leaving a like and subscribe below as it really helps this channel grow. I'll see you all next time.